Well, it was a heady weekend for political types, as you would know. If you're excited as I am by politics, you would have loved it. Brisbane played host to the G20 and every one of the world's biggest political leaders. They were there. They were all there to discuss terrorism, tax evasion and the odds of another financial crisis. And New Zealand was there too. But did our ringside seat at the Big Boys and Girls Summit actually do us any good? Professor Robert Patman, international relations expert at Otago University, as you can see, joins me now. Robert, good evening to you. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Paul.
If you were writing, if you like, a John Key report card on our presence at the G20, how would the report card read?
I think pretty positive. There's certainly some positives to take from New Zealand's participation in the G20 meeting. Firstly, the fact that the G20 members are committed to raise global economic growth by 2.1% over the next 5 years. New Zealand stands to benefit from that. Our economy is trucking along nicely, around just over 3%. So we're well placed to benefit from that growth. The other thing is, in a meeting like this, Paul, it is good for a small country, which is globally active, like New Zealand, to rub shoulders with the leaders and other players in the international arena. So I think that's a sort of, it's a vague point, but I think it's important, and it's important for the image of the country. The rest of the world can get along quite nicely without us, so it's very good for us to participate in these high-level forums. And then, of course, there was a tangible free trade agreement with South Korea. We've been negotiating with them since 2009. Mr. Key was able to finalise that agreement at the G20 summit. And it's an important agreement for New Zealand because South Korea is our sixth largest export market.
Absolutely. There are real short-term benefits in that agreement, leave alone the medium and long-term benefits. And, of course, it was John Key's, which is surprising, it was his first signed-up free trade agreement. He'll be hoping he gets a few more of those before he loses the job. Let's talk about Putin for a moment, because he was personally annexed by the leaders at the G20 to the point that he left early, although he said it was because he needed sleep. Will that particularly bother him domestically?
I think in the short term it won't, but in the long term it could. Mr. Putin has made political capital at home by asserting Russian interests in the Crimea and also in supporting the rebels in eastern Ukraine, and that has led to record approval ratings for Mr. Putin. But what's clear at the G20 meeting is that Mr. Putin was clearly taken aback by what was a consistent message from most Western leaders, including our own, that his behaviour in relation to Ukraine is totally unacceptable. And the West will, if anything, intensify sanctions against the oil and banking sectors.
And those sanctions, we must make no mistake, those sanctions really are beginning to hit home because Russia is in a very, very bad financial state, isn't it? Yes.
$128 billion of capital are projected to leave Russia, and that's the Russian central bank that's made that projection, by the end of the year. That's just not sustainable. And the ruble is in free fall at the moment. And in addition, zero growth is projected for 2015. That all adds up to what looks like a dangerous mix for Mr. Putin. He could be fighting for his political life next year.
Yeah, and actually the best case scenario, looking at it from where we are, will be zero growth. They could well get negative growth, I would have thought. Let's just very quickly handle the Obama climate change thing, because I mean, for some people, it's predictable that he would have brought this up at this time. He's in his final term. And perhaps it's a legacy issue for him. But there were some of the leaders there that were a little peeved that he, if you like, queered the pitch, changed the agenda.
Yes, I think one of those leaders was Mr. Abbott, who made it quite clear in advance. As host, he wanted to concentrate on economic matters. Mr. Obama, however, made a linkage between climate change and economic matters. Why is Mr. Obama doing this? Well, he just came from a meeting with the Chinese leaders where he signed a climate change agreement. And I think he wants the rest of the international community to do their bit. And he pledged a $3 billion contribution to the UN Climate Fund. And that led to a number of other countries, including New Zealand, joining in. So it probably had the desired effect from Mr. Obama's point of view. Yeah,
and that was a landmark conversation and agreement that Obama reached there, of course. G20 ended with David Cameron foreshadowing a possible global recession. Certainly, it was a very strong global recession warning. Was that more for the domestic market in England for Cameron? Because he seemed to be laying it on pretty thick.
Well, he is facing an election in 6 months' time, Paul. he pointed to a number of gloomy trends, including the fact that the Eurozone is on the point of recession, as he put it, that there's a slowdown in the emerging countries, which have been leaders in making economic growth. He pointed to these trends and said, you know, things are tough. And the message here, the subliminal message to the British people is, you should stick with the team that's currently in Downing Street and not risk a change in these difficult waters, or difficult times ahead, I should say.
So there was quite a domestic message there. Robert,
yes,
thank you so much for summing up the G20. There was no need for us to go after all. Robert Patman, thank you very much for joining us. Good to talk to you again.
Thank you.